We're going to be talking about one of the things you 100% don't want to be doing with your arms in the downswing. And what's really prompted this video is recently I caught up with George. Now, for those of you that don't know, George is somebody who's been sort of featuring on the channel over the last sort of 3 years. He was a sort of 4 handicapper when we originally started working together, and he's now progressed down and he's kind of bordering on that sort of scratch, getting in towards plus figures. George's journey is something very different, which we'll come back to in a future video. But what I was kind of advising George is exactly what I'd be kind of advising you guys equally. Where George's sort of backstory a little bit was that he was sort of trying to work a little bit on a fade through the season. And not that the fade was a huge disadvantage to him at all, but all that was happening was that he just sometimes felt like it was quite difficult to maybe control that type of predetermined flight, shall we say. And upon conversation, what we sort of realised was that the reason for this was because he got a little bit spinny. Now, for those of you that are really familiar with the channel will know that sort of spinny means as you start the downswing, the sort of right hip or trail hip goes forward instead of sort of pulling the lead hip back. So if you're trying to play a bit of a fade and the trail hip goes forward, it's going to be really hard to not sort of get a little bit too steep on it. And even with George's endeavours, well, hence the sort of a little bit of inconsistency. So George sort of tried to change the backswing a little bit, and he tried to work on getting that trail hip back a little bit more and also introduce a little bit more linear motion in towards the start of his downswing. And he's worked on that. But where he still is, and what we're going to do in this video is going to have a little look at a comparison between my swing and George's swing, is we're going to sort of talk a little bit about the hand path and 100% what you guys don't want to really be doing with your hands in the downswing. Right, so first things first, if we take a look at my golf swing, so I'd say it's a pretty traditional looking golf swing where I sort of just swing the golf club pretty much just up and down in a very conventional manner. And what we'll sort of see is as I swing back up, my hands kind of trace a path upwards, and then as I start the initiation in towards the downswing, my sort of hands just sort of drop down, and you can kind of see where the club shaft just points down towards my ball to target line like so. I then continue this on, and in the same sort of thread. Hands stay relatively close towards the body. With George's swing, what we're sort of noticing is the way that in the start of the downswing, the hands get a little further out, more in front of him, which then means he has to sort of try and get them closer to him coming in towards this impact area. Now, put this into context because it's only fair to George as well as it is to you guys. The reason why you should never, or my advice would be never to do this, is going to be different to what George should do. So if you are a golfer, similar to where George is getting to now, who is in control of your ball flight, then you can kind of do whatever you want to do. Right, if you kind of notice that you're a bit sort of Matt Wolf or a little bit sort of Victor Hovland where the transition looks a little sort of this way but you manage to get it back in, then I'm not advocating that you should change that. But what I am suggesting is for most amateur golfers, if your hands start getting way out here and you feel like that's because you've been fighting this spinny motion, then you certainly need to get more of a feeling of pulling those arms down and just trying to get more of a sense that the shaft, like I tried to allude to earlier, the shaft of the golf club, if I draw this extension here, just goes straight down towards the line. I'm not a massive fan of the concept of trying to force a shallowing motion, okay, because I feel like what will happen, a little bit maybe like George, your hands will possibly get out this way a little bit too much in front of you, and it leaves you more recovery to try and neutralise the club path coming back in towards the hit. I personally am a little bit more a little more old-fashioned, where I prefer a motion that looks this way, because I just kind of feel that from a biomechanical perspective, it's just a little bit more sort of plain sailing up and down. So George has been practicing using like a foam roller, and that's one of the things that we sort of talked about. We placed a little bit of like a what do you call them, swimming float. That's I put a swimming float out in front of him, and that was just to again try and encourage him to feel like his arms are getting a little bit closer to him in the downswing position. Now, the reason why this conversation is so important is because how can you, as I've talked about in past videos, keep your arms in front of your body if I'm now sort of trying to suggest that you don't want your hands to go too far in front of your body, right? It's confusing. Well, it sort of is and it isn't, right? The thing that you want to be doing is You don't want your left arm to get stuck across your chest too much. So you only really want to let your left arm in the backswing come in a little bit like so. So just relative, just a few degrees like this. And then because we rotate the chest in the backswing, okay, and we elevate the arm a little bit higher, that's what kind of gives us this visual effect. But the thing is, you see, if you're somebody whose trail hip goes forward, then you are going to saturate the space between your chest and arm and they're going to get a bit too close. If you pull the lead hip back, you can still get your arms theoretically looking a little more like mine, like so, and not going this way. So what I'm trying to say is that you'd never want to let your hands go massively out this way. But what I'm also trying to say is that the main reason why that would probably be happening is because it's a trail hip fault. So 100%, if you are in that category of spinny and hands out, you're going to struggle. I would suggest get more of a feeling of a little bit more of an old traditional hip bump and pull those hands down, because this is a safer place. Once you get here, then you can start worrying about reintroducing your rotation and your clearance in the hip, which we're going to talk about in an upcoming video. Loads of new stuff going to be coming up on the channel again moving forward. I'm going to be dusting off the golf clubs, going to be showing you a few of the things that I've been practicing and working on in my swing. But for now, don't let those hands get too far in front of your body, because I just think it'll give you too much inconsistency. See you soon.